Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Soul Centered CEO Show. So excited to be back this week and to be joined by my dear friend, Mr. Jake Blanchard. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Haley.
Always a pleasure to spend time with you, whether it's in real life or virtual. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I do want to just share a little bit about your background, your bio with the listeners, so that way they know what a rock star that you are. So Jake is a father, husband, business consultant, and high-performance coach, determined to leave a lasting impact. You own a management consulting firm called Delta Perspective, and you've done program management, process improvement, change management, business strategy for the majority of your career. You are passionate about solving problems, exploring new opportunities, maintaining a positive and persistent mindset, here to grow and scale businesses, strengthen individuals, and catalyze change. I love all this. Such good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You're doing what you love in your life, and you push yourself physically, mentally to explore creativity with your podcasts and all the other wonderful projects that you have going on. So we're so excited to have you this week.
Yeah, it's an honor to be on. I'm a big fan of yours. I'm a fan of what you're doing and a fan of the show. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I want to dive in to kind of just start off, Jake, with maybe you sharing a little bit about how you got to this point. Obviously, you're doing what you love. You've found a way to bring all of what I would say, your gifts, your talents, your passions to the table in a way that now has been able to create a business and life that you love. Do you want to share kind of a little bit of your story and the background of how you kind of created this company that you're doing now, the consulting and that piece?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not just an accidental entrepreneur. I'm kind of an accidental business person. I never really planned on getting into the world of management consulting or project portfolio management or anything like that. I grew up in South Louisiana, a small town for the first part of my childhood, and I ended up in Alaska. And it just so happened that a girl who I was dating at the time, who's my wife now, about 17, 18 years ago, had really planted a flag in the ground and said, I'm going to college. That's what I'm going to do. And then really, I'd taken SATs. I'm by no means the top of the class. But I knew that it was an option for me if I wanted to do it, but I wasn't very serious about going out and doing it. And her and I moved to Boise when we were 18. And I had to get really serious about college and found my way fascinated with business operations by about 2 or 3 years into that college journey. And what I realized was that although a lot of innovations are made around technology and business, one of the things that's always going to be there is the opportunity to improve from an efficiency standpoint, from a communication standpoint. There's always going to be infrastructure changes as technology improves, as the machines improve. Somebody has to go put that stuff into a facility or make some strategic decisions about how businesses move forward. So fascinated with that. Found myself in the first role that I was ever in, working as a contractor. So I quickly started my own consulting company at 21 years old. I said, okay, I'm going to call it Delta Perspective, and I'm going to start this company because I'm a contractor right now. And for tax reasons, it just kind of made sense for me to have my own business. And so I got to cut my teeth a little bit in that capacity. Took on some full-time employment positions, mostly in the world of consulting, either internal or external facing on behalf of other organizations and their technology products, or the kind of process improvement opportunities that they have within their organization. And through that time, I had 2 or 3 different starts and stops of being an entrepreneur again, of saying, oh, I could do this better on my own. And I'd go out and I'd get a contract and I worked that for a couple of years. And then I'd look for the security of working for, another company. And then about 2 years ago, I finally said, you know what, I've acquired about 15 years worth of knowledge in this space. I'm really interested in working for myself and deciding what projects interest me the most or interest my firm the most. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
I love it so much. It's very familiar to me, your path and your story, because I kind of did the same dance, right? In the corporate world and then on my own. And sometimes I ran parallel paths, right? And I also always loved the flexibility of being an entrepreneur, but also the stability of being, on the other side too. So I totally understand that. And also just the fascination with fixing things. Yeah. I love the way that part of your brain is like, oh, I can see how this would be so much better if we could implement X, Y, and Z and that type of thing. So you specifically now, after these last couple of years, have been focusing on a specific type of client, or like what kind of companies do you work for?
Yeah. So working with, right now I have actually a fairly large organization that is my primary customer. I won't put their name out there, but they're really big in the animal health space. And so I've been able to work with them to build out a project management office internally for their enterprise, and then also take on various roles around their digital strategy, which is currently what I find myself doing the majority of the day. Yeah. I have a couple other clients. I have actually a polyphase farm, which is really interesting. They're a fully organic group here in Boise, or outside of Boise, that do a lot of production animal, chickens, pigs, cows, but, in a really humane and nice way. So it's fun to have clients that are driven by social responsibility in some way, shape, or form. Right. I work with a company who's, they have like a personal care, like beard oils. Yes. They're a client of mine as well. And then, yeah, that's really about it from the day to day. I mean, I do some advisory work with a behavioral health facility as well. That's just kind of kicking off right now. But that role is not like day to day kind of project management work. So, healthcare is where I've spent the majority of my career. I mean, I've worked for a hospital here in Idaho for about 5 years. I was independent as a contractor at UCLA Medical Center for a couple of years. I ran a consultancy for a company called HealthWise based out of Boise. So I gravitate toward healthcare mostly because I know it, but I'm so interested to work in, the e-commerce or, the agriculture, or specifically ag tech space. So that's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
I love it. And my favorite story is you were sharing with me previously that sometimes you get to take home a stash of stuff from the farm. They like give you a bag and let you just. Oh yeah.
Yeah. What a cool opportunity that was. Like they, the folks who own the farm are, could not be nicer people, and to have an opportunity to try some of their products, whether it be the eggs or steak or some pork belly. Man, that's what a cool perk.
Nice little bonus
of the gig is going out and finding people that are doing really great work, and then also trying to add value to them and being able to share in their output. So
yeah, it's super cool. Super cool. Okay, so let's think about this So 15 years plus you've been doing your own thing, right? If you will. What advice would you give to someone that's maybe been on only the corporate side and really has this vision, this dream of doing their own thing or branching out a little bit and maybe taking a shot at doing the entrepreneur side? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think, the first thing is if you're working in, hopefully that you've gained a lot of experience, that's what the corporate side of things allows you to do. It gives you a lot of reps and a lot of experience working for an established organization with an established problem set. Yeah. The thing that it does to you, however, in a lot of ways, it can erode your confidence and it makes you kind of a person who asks for a lot more permission. And when you have to work within the red tape or the structures of large organizations, you tend to work within your scope of practice, which means as an entrepreneur making that jump, it becomes very hard to wear the multiple hats that you must wear. And a lot of times, wow, you're kind of looking for someone to knight you or anoint you or tell you that it's within your capability. And that was one of the things that I struggled with my first 2 passes at being fully independent. Like I just felt like somebody needed to tell me that I was doing a good job, and I was having a hard time finding that within. And coaching helps, Right? So if you have not been an entrepreneur and you've worked in a large organization for a long time, I'd strongly suggest a mentor or a coach or somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, because that's really going to help build your confidence to go. And I didn't do that until kind of this last round of entrepreneurship, really seeking the outside eyes of others, and having, a friend and mentor of mine, Bedros Koulian, basically tell me, what are you fucking waiting on? Like, what? Sorry, can I curse on here? Sorry. But it's like, who is going to say what you need to hear? Like you need somebody who's not tied to the bottom line of your business to sit there and tell you that you're give you an attaboy. Like, what are you doing with that? And like, for me to overcome that and just have the confidence that like, I'm making the decisions, I'm driving it forward. I've got to, you either win or you learn. I'm going to fail. It's totally okay. Ask for advice when you can. That's what I would put out there. It's like, you have the skills and the ability to do it. Go get some outside eyes and be confident in your skill set. Because I certainly wasn't, at least in 2013.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's such a powerful piece of advice, because you're right. So many of us, and most of the time we're all taught to seek outside of ourselves for approval, appreciation, validation, acceptance, love, whatever it is. Right. Yeah. And the more you can turn that inward and like self-source, that becomes a really powerful force, I think, for us to be able to know that we can do it, know that we have the skills and the ability. So the confidence, it creates confidence,
Oh yeah. 100%.
It's interesting you said about permission. I remember sitting in a prospect meeting, a sales meeting, and I was the expert in my part in the wellness piece, and I'm in with these benefits guys, right, in healthcare setting, and I'll never forget. I knew we needed to go off script, off the presentation that we had spent hours and days working on, but I could feel it, and I was like, if we pitch what's in this deck, they're not going to buy it. And at one point I looked over at the boss, the CEO of the company, and I was like, can I say what I really want to say? Like, but I had to ask permission, because it was his deal. And if I messed it up, I would lose it. And I just always think about having to ask permission, and how now being an entrepreneur and being on my own, I don't ask anybody for anything other than, like, hey, do you want to come to the south of France or somewhere fabulous? And it's it's a whole different vibe. It's a whole different energy. And it's such a lovely feeling to know that the buck stops with you, and like you are the end of the road. And that feels really good. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said there. I have a very similar experience of like being a whole brain thinker, a systems thinker, that you really, and you hope the organization trusts you, right? But like, you see something that needs to be done. You're the only one with the flashlight on it. It's a complex topic to like explain, and you're looking for that trust. Yeah. But the trust is only there so far, because you don't feel like you can speak up yet. Like you don't feel like that there's going to be a tension that you take a meeting over or whatever it is. And if you're an entrepreneur, or if you built a team around you, a lot of these small businesses, and I know the team that I built around me, like I trust them. If they have something to say, like, hey, we're in this together. And if you miss, we miss. Let's not connect a lot of negative data points. But if you're around me, it's probably because you have some kind of insight that I value. Exactly. And I know that going into a meeting, it's tough in the corporate world for sure.
It is tough. But that's leadership. What you just said, it's like really being able to release the control, like release the reins, and let people show up and shine in their own right and in their own expertise and brilliance. And I think if I learned anything from being in those corporate positions, was surround yourself with really smart people that know what they're doing, pay them well, and empower them to really shine, because that's when you get the best out of everyone anyway. So I love that. And now, so you've got all of these beautiful clients. You also, what I find fascinating, have all these other hobbies, like outside of your business. You're so passionate about a few other things. Do you want to share a little bit about some of those other things? Because I feel like, to me, Jake, it makes you so interesting and so well-rounded. And like when, in your bio talking about you're committed to your own excellence and your own best self, if you will. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you have kind of incorporated these really amazing other activities that you do in your life.
I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, there's I was a collector of passive hobbies for the majority of my my 20s. So like I would get into brewing beer. It's just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. In fact, folks that know me and have been to my the first house I owned here in Boise, like I built out a huge kind of, I don't want to say like a shop area, but I had, 2 large tables. I drill press all kinds of stuff because I had aspirations of doing more woodworking and never did any of it. Never. So like I had a lot of like ideas in my mind, but as I, actually going out and doing them or putting the investment into mastery was something that I hadn't sat beside myself and really understood that I was missing. And it was mostly because I was just trying to figure out who I was. So I totally forgive myself for that thing. I'm not the best woodworker. I never really wanted to be, but I thought that would impress other people. And so I was, I just had this vision in my head of like making a horse, like handing a horse to someone. Look at this horse I've made you, what a thoughtful gift. But, and really my life wasn't plumbed for it. I didn't really have the time to do those types of things, especially not being overly passionate. So thankfully, what happened was I got into brewing beer, and I brewed several batches of beer, and I drank several batches of beer. And I started realizing that the hobbies that I was choosing was just kind of a supplement to a behavior that was starting to manifest in a negative way in my life. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, man, well, maybe right around the time my daughter was born, I was like, maybe I should stop brewing the beer so much and maybe take on a hobby that is physically active. And so I got into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I've been practicing jiu-jitsu now for about 6 years, purple belt under a guy named Keith Owen here in Boise, which is an honor to train under Keith or Professor Keith. And then I realized that jiu-jitsu is really hard if you're out of shape. So then I said, okay, well, now I have to make a commitment into working out. And so, I leveraged the jiu-jitsu into the working out. And it's like, okay, well, that's only part of it. Now I have to eat healthy. So then I got into like eating healthy a lot more. Yeah. So that bolted on one area of my life where I lost a lot of weight. But then I said, well, I found out a couple of years in, I hadn't done the mental work yet. Right? The behavioral work that's associated with those types of things. And so I've really looked inward into figuring out how to optimize my time and stay positive and keep that positive mindset and the strengthening the muscle between your ears, so to speak, that absolutely has to happen if you're going to attribute balance to any improvement that you've made in your life. And so I've found a lot of time to study over 2 or 3 years to do that. And then now what it's turned into is I will take on challenges, hobbies, interesting things with the mindset of building mastery and staying healthy and learning as much as I can. And just recently, I've got a friend of mine who's doing he's doing the Moab 240.
Oh, wow.
It's a like 238-mile race in Utah. It takes like the fastest time ever. I think it's like 57 minutes or 57 hours, excuse me. 60 hours, something like that. So he's going to be running for like 75 hours, something crazy like that. So I'm on a team that's helping him out. And, part of that is learning to pace. And, I'm going to have to figure out how to run, and I'm getting there, but figure out how to run 20-mile stretches to support him and his dream and just being around folks like that. So that's what I find myself gravitating toward is like these interesting hobbies that make me better, that put me around people who are achieving their goals and their dreams. But the number one thing I do is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it's sort of a little side tangent there, but
no, that's great. I love when it kind of goes all the way around. I think it's so fabulous how just by saying yes to one thing, it was like a domino, right? And you said, yes, I want to do this. And it led to this entire lifestyle change. It's so fascinating. So do you feel like, Jake, how do you feel like that transition, your physical transition, like affected your business, right? Like, cause I'm sure that there was a correlation there, and I'm just curious how were you showing up differently? Was there more confidence? Was there more, peace, calm, ease, like with your body feeling like functioning on a higher level of nutrition and so forth?
Yeah, I think, this it's funny because I talked about having to do the work between the ears. It's because losing the weight put me in a position where I got this confidence. And when you're not tempering that confidence with humility,
Yeah.
you kind of become an asshole.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's so funny. The archetype of like a bro who's like, ripped down by the beach is, kind of can kind of be an ass. Right. And so like I developed that at 29 years old, whereas like I was in good shape and I thought I was hot shit for being in good shape. And, it was for me, it was important to finally take a step back and reflect and be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is actually turning you into a worse employee. Like
Right.
to walk in with this ego, this arrogance, this confidence. And, certainly folks that worked with me would argue both sides of it. I feel like I was a great person to work with. I feel like also, my downside was that ego. And so that was the investment of self-development, self-reflection, looking inward, learning to sit beside myself. I had some things that I need to kind of reparent myself, that concept of reparenting, going back and, sitting with yourself as a child in certain situations that, caused wounds or some valleys in your mental psyche. And as I did that work, what I realized is like, this is supposed to be fun, right? This whole life, this thing that we're doing, like it's supposed to be fun. And somebody dropped by my podcast the other day, a guy named Brian Bogert. He's a motivational speaker. I know you've heard him speak as well. And Brian said a quote from Ryan Holiday that summed it up really well for me. He's like, there's only the things that happen and the stories that we tell ourselves about them.
Right.
Right. And so when I started to realize that, when I was like, oh, the story that I'm telling myself right now is not congruent with the story that somebody would tell themselves who is successful, consistent, full of love and energy and advice for others. And like the story that I'm telling myself is that I overcame my own bad behaviors and that makes me something, as opposed to the story that I'm telling myself now is I'm a thoughtful, loving husband. I'm a serious entrepreneur. I value service to others. And when I started adopting that story, that's what made me maybe a little bit better at business and set me up for success as an entrepreneur, because I've had, the best 2 years I've ever had financially, as far as the relationship with my family, with my kids. Like I don't travel. I don't get on planes all the time anymore. Like my life is in more balance now than it ever has been. And I'm busier now than I ever have been, but it's just having that outlook of, yeah, this is fun. This is what we're doing. So
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Totally. And I think I love that perspective. And, you mentioned something to me, just around the idea of shifting from a place of like, oh, what are people going to think? And maybe I shouldn't do da da da. And you were just like, you know what? I'm open. It is what it is. Right. And I love that so much about you, because not everyone's like that. Right. And there's still so many people that are so stuck in the, what are they going to think? Or is my house going to be perfect? Or is am I doing the right things? And I love that you've got just this peaceful ease and grace about your life. And it shows in I think all of the ways you show up in all of the different pieces, at least the ones that I've experienced of you personally. It's lovely to see that just ease. You're just open and easy. And that's lovely.
Yeah, for sure. That I think perspective is a lubricant of life, right? Like as long as you can take a step back and challenge your own perspective about things and seek the advice of others and make a commitment to being a better human in whatever way that has to manifest in your life. Like it's, it naturally keeps going faster and faster and faster and faster. And, I certainly have to take a step back sometimes. I still certainly get burnt out sometimes. I get out of balance sometimes, but my recovery speed is what's changed, right? Because I can get back to that good mindset. I can get back to that good perspective. I can like reset. I can forgive myself. I can put myself in a position of success by coaching yours truly.
Yeah.
And I don't have to spend so much time being, frustrated or seeking advice or, those types of things. I can quickly get to the gap and then go seek out that information instead of just being stuck.
Yeah. And um, that's a beautiful gift for yourself to be able to almost like self-soothe and self-redirect.
Yeah.
I used to, and I think a lot of us are kind of external processors, right? Always like, well, what do you think about this? Or asking people their opinion or their thoughts. And finally you get to a point where you're just like, yeah, actually I can do this.
Yeah.
I can redirect myself and reset my own energy, my own mindset and be fine and not have to always seek outside anymore. So that's a very powerful place to be, I know that you recently or within 6 months, I think, started your own podcast. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about, what was the intention behind that, and tell us about maybe some of your favorite episodes. I mean, I know you love having the conversations, and that's your main motivation, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I started the Jake Blanchard podcast in September of last year.
Okay.
I had thought about doing a podcast for 3 to 4 years. To be completely honest, just traveling as much as I did, I got exposed to a lot of podcasts, just kind of listening on airplanes. I loved the way that Joe Rogan set up his podcast because he had who he wanted to have on, and he talked about what he wanted to talk about. And I also love the early stories about him starting the podcast because he did it without anything in mind, like monetary gain, wasn't selling anything, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, man, what a freeing vehicle to just be genuinely interested in others. And one of the things that I wanted to work on in the year of 2020 was being more interested than interesting. I wanted to close some gaps in how I can be present in having conversations, facilitating conversations. I was like, man, a podcast would be a great vehicle for that. And then also, I was a traveling consultant for 8 years. I mean, I've been on a plane, anywhere from 35 to 40 weeks a year for 8 years around the country. Yeah. And I talked to a lot of people in airports and airplanes. It's funny. Some people dread the talkative person that sits next to them to be, and I got the emotional intelligence toward the back end of my tenure flying. I kind of knew when people were interested in talking and not, but I would, I can just ask questions. Oh, where are you from? Okay. Yeah. What do your kids do? Okay. How do you feel about that? So it was very natural for me to want to ask those questions to pass the time. I think it kind of changed it on its head when COVID happened, and I was sitting in the house for the better part of 6-7 months before I really got serious about starting the podcast and realized that what was missing, what was filling missing for me was getting other people, real people's perspective on their life or journeys that they've taken, or they tell me about a vitamin or a supplement that they use. And, hey, that's interesting to me now. Now I can go research something. So yeah, started the Jake Blanchard podcast in September. I'm 57 episodes in now, which is 1 or 2 a week. And yeah, as far as conversations I've had that just really stand out for me, I've been a long-term podcast fan of a guy named Daniele Balelli. He's got the History on Fire podcast, Drunken Taoist podcast. It's one of the biggest history podcasts, I think, ever. Him and Dan Carlin have some pretty big ones. And I, to get to speak with him for about an hour and, just talk about the current state of affairs in the world and talk about some of the cool and interesting things that he's doing, that kind of blew my mind. And then, also I'm part of a group called the Modern Day Night Project. That was put on by a guy named Bedros Keuilian. And, to interview Bedros and the instructors from that project. And then also just the cool and interesting people that kind of make their way through that personal development program. It's an intense 75-hour program that just helps you level up in leadership and life. And it was a big catalyst for me. It kind of gave me a kick in the pants. And to be able to have those folks hop on the podcast and just give them a platform to share their interesting stories as well. That's been a really cool experience as well. I've had many of the project graduates or instructors drop by.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. And I agree. I think, well, just like where I met you at the event we went to, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, there were so many interesting people there. It's like, but when there's that many people, you don't necessarily always get to dive in, deeply, which I always like to do.
Well, and Haley, it's funny. It's like we have to track back, like what paths we take to meet one another. Like my good friend is a guy named Nolan Nitschke. Nolan owns an art gallery in Bishop, California called the Sierra Light Gallery. And I told him he used to be my neighbor in college, and he photographed my wedding. He's only done 2 weddings, his sister's and mine, because he's not a person photographer. He's a nature photographer. Guy's been in the Smithsonian a bunch of times. Like he's a savage. Well, I told him when he opens a gallery, I'm going to buy a print from him. And I have a large print on my wall from him. And I ended up having him on the podcast. And then when he gets off my podcast, he goes, "Hey, I know this guy who's bought some art from me. His name's George Bryant." He's
wow.
like, he goes, "You and George should talk, because George does some really interesting things in the speaking and the business space." And so I ended up talking to George and had George on my podcast. And then all of a sudden George has an event, and I go to that event, and at that event, I get to meet you. And then the ecosystem that's around you as well, which is a very positive, just passionate, like supportive, very cool people to be around. So, again, I think because I started a podcast now, I get to be part of these other kind of subgroups around, and it just fills my cup. And what a cool vehicle to learn about people and life through.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I remember specifically at that event, for years my friends always made fun of me because they're like, "Wow, when we go to parties or things, you don't flitter around and talk to everybody, but you will know every single thing about one person by the end of the night." Yeah. And I'm like, exactly, because I would rather know one person than flitter, and I call it church chat. We're like, "Hey, how are you? Hi, fine, how are you?" Like that kind of thing. Yeah. And I just remember having lunch with you one day, and I was like, I knew where you were from. I knew your kids' names and your wife's name, and I knew all your favorite hobbies and all of these cool things. And I thought, that's the beauty of, not only being in real life, but even having these conversations. You can get to know people on a much different level than just kind of that superficial part that I'm not a fan of.
Yeah. And I think the entrepreneurial mindset puts you in a position where you go and you seek others in that way. I mean, it's really hard outside of professional associations that are niche to really build bonds when you're doing the 9-to-5 thing, because you're doing the 9-to-5, you probably got a pretty good schedule around your family, or you're working out and your blinders are on. When you're an entrepreneur, you're just looking around all the time, and you just really have to be reactive, and you have to deal with problems quickly. And it puts you in a position where the types of events or associations or organizations that you seek out are just different by nature. They're on the bleeding edge. Sometimes they're focused on these really nuanced topics that you never thought you'd be sitting in a room learning about. Like NLP is one that's, the neuro-linguistics programming, like, or processing, whatever it is. But like, I've been in 2 or 3 events in the last 2 years that really focused on reading body language and kind of understanding how we speak and talk and our mannerisms. I'm like, oh, this is really important. Like another thing to bolt on from a skill set standpoint. So yeah, it's certainly been awesome to get so many opportunities to do stuff like that.
Yeah, just to meet other like-minded, cool people. I think for me, part of the transition from my corporate work to being more on my own was I was surrounded by people all the time, all day, every day. And then when you exit that world and you start your own journey, it can be very isolating. It can be you can feel very disconnected. And so that's actually why we're even having this conversation on the Soul Centered CEO show, is because I really felt like it was important to put something together that would allow other incredible humans that happen to be entrepreneurs, that have a heart for service, to be in a container, to know that they're not alone, right? And provide some support and connection. So that's what, and you met several of them that were there with us at the event. So
100%.
Yeah, good people. And it's magical when you put, people with big hearts and big dreams in a room, whether it be a real room or a virtual room. It's still beautiful and magical. So I love it, Jake. So where can our listeners find you, follow you, stay in touch with you, stay connected?
Yeah, 100%. I've got two websites. I got jakeblanchard.com. You can go to that. You'll see links to the podcast. I have a web series called Out Jakes, which is just me getting out in the community and doing fun, interesting stuff with folks. So flying in helicopters and distilling alcohol and just doing like lots of random fun things. So check out jakeblanchard.com. I also have some coaching on that site as well. If you want to reach out to me for that, I have a coaching program called WITS, which stands for Why I'm the Shit. It's got I have a brash style, but certainly it's being digitized right now. I'm very, I'm maxed out right now on one-on-one coaching clients, but if you're interested, I do have a wait list. So reach out to me there. deltaplife.com is my consultancy. And then, Jake in Blanchard on Instagram, Jacob Blanchard, I think on LinkedIn. So you type my name into Google, you'll find me. And then I do respond to all my DMs. I respond to the outreach. So please reach out. I'd love to have a conversation.
And definitely follow you on your podcast. Listen to
follow that Jake Blanchard podcast. It's it's on YouTube, but most of my listeners are on iTunes or Spotify for sure. So YouTube gets some views, but not even a fraction of what we're doing on the listening platforms.
Cool. Well, I hope that they will take advantage of all those resources and step into your world and your vortex, because it's a lovely place. And I just appreciate your time today, appreciate your friendship, and love the light that you bring to the world. You and your
and I share that 100% for you, Haley. What a blessing, what a gift it is to have positive, energetic people enter into my life. So, thank you for your time and thank you for the platform.
Thank you. And thanks for tuning in this week, you guys. And we'll look forward to the next episode.